The radios were still live, but Indigo Six had stopped asking for assistance. Breathing filled the empty spaces where voices had once been. Short, uneven gasps blended with static and the distant sound of wind scraping itself across stone. Grey 12 didn't need gunfire to feel hostile. Even in silence, the canyon pressed inward, dust settling over wounded men as if already deciding where they would fall. No one said it aloud, but hope had thinned into something fragile and dangerous. Back in the command tent, the fractured transmission played again. Contact, casualties, then nothing. Officers stood motionless around the map, their eyes locked on the red circle marked over Grey 12. Someone finally voiced what everyone already knew. No aircraft survived that corridor. No one challenged it. The silence felt final. Down in the canyon, the spotter adjusted his damaged optic out of habit rather than expectation. Then the sound came. Low, metallic, rising fast. It didn't belong to wind, rock, or memory. It was wrong for this place. Every man who had ever trained beneath open skies felt it strike their chest before it reached their ears. The spotter froze. One voice, barely louder than breath, spoke the name he thought had been buried with old reports and sealed files. She's back. Before we begin, be sure to subscribe to Military and Veteran Stories so you never miss these true accounts of courage. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from today, 2 days earlier. Camp Ridgeway felt like a place designed to forget. The runway baked beneath a pale sun, and the wind carried jet fuel and dust in equal measure. Engines roared and faded, crews joked and shouted, and everything moved with the familiar rhythm of war that had learned to look routine. Lieutenant Colonel Evelyn Ryland did not move with it. She sat on a dented bench near Hangar 4, shoulders squared, boots planted, hands resting loosely in her lap. She looked like a pilot on break, yet she never crossed the painted line marking the restricted bay. Inside that bay, her A-10 sat beneath a weathered tarp. It wasn't broken at least not officially. It simply existed in the strange half-life the military assigns to things it doesn't want to explain. The aircraft was close enough to smell, close enough to touch, yet it might as well have been on another continent. Ryland was in her early 40s, hair pulled tight out of habit, jaw set like it had been carved that way. Her grounding order was older than most of the airmen on the ramp. 2 years old, written in clean language that said nothing about screaming alarms. Canyon walls, or the run-through Grey 12, no one wanted to discuss. It simply read, Operational restrictions pending evaluation. The evaluation had never closed. That was how the rumors survived quietly, safely, between coffee breaks and toolboxes. Some said she was unstable. Others said she chased danger like it owed her something. Some claimed she couldn't let go of the men she saved in Grey 12, as if saving them had cost her more than the paperwork admitted. The ugliest version said she enjoyed it. Ryland never corrected anyone. She showed up early every morning and sat where she could watch the tarp shift in the wind. She watched the runway like a clock, as if movement itself might reveal something important if she stared long enough. When no one was watching, she checked weather reports on a battered tablet not for a flight schedule, because she had none but out of habit. Wind speed, visibility, pressure shifts that could turn a calm day into a coffin inside a canyon. She wore her flight gloves even when walking between buildings. The leather scuffed and creased, molded to her hands like they belonged there. A younger airman once asked why she still wore them, half joking like it was a costume she hadn't retired. Ryland had looked at him calmly, unreadable, and kept walking. On the ramp, 2 pilots leaned against a truck and spoke loudly enough for anyone nearby to hear. They joked about cowboy runs and renegade pilots, the kind of stories people tell when they want bravery to sound like recklessness. One nodded toward Hangar 4 and smirked, as if the tarp itself were a punchline. Ryland remained still. She didn't flinch or glare. Her silence wasn't defeat. It was discipline, the kind that refuses to waste energy on words that won't change the outcome. The base moved around her as if she were a fixed point no one wanted to acknowledge. Then, before midday, the tone of the air changed. Subtle at first, like laughter fading when a senior voice enters a room. The sound of boots shifted. Footsteps tightened. A runner crossed the tarmac toward the command building, clutching a folder like it mattered. Ryland watched him without turning her head. Panic had a shape, and it always ran the same way. Inside the command tent, the air felt colder than it should have been. Maps covered the walls. A large screen glowed with grainy satellite imagery. Radio chatter layered the space like fog. But the loudest sound came from a short recording played again and again. Static. Breathing. A strained voice forcing calm. Indigo 6. Contact. Multiple sides. Casualties. Then silence. The kind that felt like a door slamming shut. Colonel Matthew Calder stood at the center table, hands flat on the map, eyes fixed on the grid. He didn't waste motion. His face showed no fear, but his jaw told a different story. Staff Sergeant Owen Pike replayed the transmission again, as if repetition might produce a miracle. First Lieutenant Ryan Hale leaned over the map, marking the grid with a grease pencil. His hand hesitated, not because he didn't know where to draw, but because he did. Gray 12. The name settled into the tent like smoke. Captain Elise Ward stood near the screen. Arms crossed tight, eyes moving between intelligence notes and the map. She looked like someone weighing the cost of speaking the truth aloud. One officer finally said, quiet, sharp. No aircraft survives Gray 12. No one argued. Not because they agreed, but because arguing would mean pretending there was a choice. Calder lifted his gaze. He didn't ask who was responsible. He didn't ask how it happened. He asked the only question that mattered. Is Indigo still breathing? The tent went still. Hale swallowed and nodded once, like it hurt. Yes, sir. That single word shifted the air. Calder turned to Ward. Has anyone ever flown that corridor and lived? Ward hesitated, and in that half-second, the room felt like it stood on the edge of a cliff. Then she spoke carefully. There's one, sir. A few heads lifted. A few shoulders tightened. Hope tried to enter and was immediately held back by fear. Ward kept her eyes on the paper in her hand. Lieutenant Colonel Evelyn Ryland. Call sign Ghost 3. She cleared Gray 12 solo 2 years ago. The name landed heavy, like metal on concrete. Some in the tent had heard of her. Others only knew the rumors. Everyone understood what one pilot, one canyon, and one survival meant. Calder didn't look impressed. He looked focused. Where is she? A reluctant voice answered. Camp Ridgeway, sir, Grounded Ward added quietly. Evaluation never closed. Calder's eyes narrowed not in judgment, but calculation. He didn't ask if she was stable or popular or cleared by paperwork. He asked again, anchoring everything to one truth. Is Indigo still breathing? Yes, sir, Hale said. Firmer this time. Calder nodded once. The decision had already been made. Outside Hangar 4, a mechanic passed Ryland with a rag over his shoulder. He didn't stop or salute. He spoke casually, like he was commenting on the weather. Gray 12. And kept walking. Ryland lifted her eyes. The wind tugged at the tarp covering her A-10, the fabric snapping softly like a signal. No order was given. No request was made. Only a name hung in the air, followed by a silence that sounded too much like men waiting to die. Lieutenant. Colonel Evelyn Ryland stood. She crossed the airfield as if the decision had been made long ago. She didn't run or look around. She moved with the calm certainty of someone who knew exactly where the line was and chose to cross it anyway. Her flight suit was zipped but imperfect. One sleeve rolled too high. The collar sat crooked. Strands of hair escaped at the edges, lifting in the wind as if it couldn't hold her today. Ground crew noticed. Tools paused mid-clink. A forklift slowed without intent. 2 airmen exchanged a glance that asked the same question silently. Is she really doing it? No one stepped in her way. That was the strange part. Not that she was breaking a rule rules broke every day in war, but that everyone seemed to remember something older than policy. They remembered what Gray 12 did to men. They remembered what it took to go in anyway. Ryland reached Hangar 4 and stopped at the painted boundary. For half a second, she stared at it like it was a joke, a strip of paint, pretending to be authority. Then she stepped over it. The tarp came off in one pull, sliding away like a curtain. Beneath it, the A-10 looked both tired and solid, a machine built to endure punishment. Its skin carried quiet scars, scratches, faded panels. The kind of wear that needed no explanation. Master Sergeant Cole Danner was already there. He didn't block her path or make a show. He stepped in to put truth between her and the aircraft. "Ma'am," he said quietly. Respectful, tight. Ryland kept moving. Danner matched her pace, eyes scanning the jet like he was reading illness in metal. "She's marginal," he said. "Fuel's low. Hydraulics are touchy. Flares aren't where they should be. Countermeasures." He swallowed. "Questionable." Ryland climbed into the cockpit. Warm electronics. Oil. Old air. Her hands found the controls without thought. Switches clicked. Systems woke. The aircraft answered like it remembered her. On the radio, the tower controller's voice snapped alive. "Ghost 3, state intentions. You are not cleared for taxi." Ryland checked her display's low fuel, blinking warnings, uncertain countermeasures. She breathed once and keyed the mic. "Taxiing." The controller's voice rose. "Negative. Lieutenant Colonel Ryland, you are grounded by directive. Hold position." Ryland released the brakes. The A-10 rolled forward. "Ghost 3, stop taxi immediately." "This is an order." Ryland kept moving. In the command tent, arguments ignited. "She's taking an aircraft without clearance." Hale looked up. "Sir, if she's moving, she's going." Ward watched like someone seeing the only answer approach a locked door. Calder didn't shout. He stared at the map like it was a wounded man bleeding somewhere he couldn't reach. "This will be a court-martial," someone said. Pike replayed Indigo's last transmission. Breathing. Static. Silence. Calder lifted his head. "Is Indigo still breathing?" "Yes, sir." "Then we act like it." His voice was calm, absolute. "If a pilot is willing to fly into Gray 12, we support that mission." No one argued. On the runway, Ryland aligned with centerline. The tower pleaded. "Ghost 3, you are not cleared for takeoff." She stared ahead, feeling the weight of the order behind her and the heavier weight of silence ahead. She advanced the throttle. The engines roared. The aircraft surged. The runway blurred. The A-10 lifted, stubborn and slow, then free. Inside Gray 12, Indigo 6 was collapsing by inches. Mercer pressed against stone, blood warm on his neck, voice steady, because steady voices spread. "Stay tight. Count rounds." Grant worked the wounded, hands slick, whispering, "Stay with me." Vin adjusted his broken optic out of refusal to surrender. Fire struck rock above them. Mercer lifted the radio but didn't speak. He already had. Back at Ridgeway, airmen watched the A-10 shrink into distance. Danner stood with arms crossed, hoping the storm remembered fear. Calder issued orders. "If Ghost 3 opens that corridor, we pull Indigo out. And if she fails, we keep trying," Calder said. Because Indigo is still breathing. Far ahead, Ryland flew toward the place everyone else avoided. Gray 12 waited. It didn't open. It closed. The canyon tightened. Light sharpened. Air slammed the fuselage. Alarms screamed. Ryland shut them off not from arrogance, but necessity. She dropped lower. Ground effect held her by inches. Rock walls became presence, not scenery. Her hands made movements too small to see, keeping the aircraft where logic said it couldn't be. Gray 12 breathed. And she breathed with it. Asterisk. This was not textbook flying. This was instinct shaped by memory. The A-10 lagged slightly to the left exactly as she remembered. A vibration rippled through the stabilizer at a point she had already anticipated, and she corrected before the aircraft could protest. Ahead, the canyon twisted. Ryland did not hesitate. She adjusted power by feel instead of numbers, guiding the nose through the turn with confidence born from knowing precisely what waited beyond it. On the ground, Chief Lucas Vivin felt it before he understood it. He lay behind his damaged optic, cheek pressed to the stock, trying to make sense of motion in the sky, where motion should not exist. The sound was louder now, filling the canyon with a metallic pressure that made the air hum. The aircraft did not move the way the simulator predicted. It dipped where no pilot should dip. It clung to the wall instead of the center line. It corrected before turbulence revealed itself, as if it already knew where the air would fracture. Ben's breath caught. That was not chance. No manual taught that. He had trained alongside pilots. He had watched air support operate overhead countless times. This was different. This was someone flying with the canyon instead of fighting against it. He keyed his radio, then stopped himself. There was nothing to say yet. Above him, Rylan lined up her first run. She didn't rush it. Enemy positions were scattered along the ridges, dug in and patient, waiting for something larger and slower to wander into their trap. She saw them as heat and shape, the way pilots learn to interpret threats as geometry rather than people. She rolled slightly, refined her angle, then squeezed the trigger. The Gwat spoke, not in a sustained roar, not as a spectacle meant to impress. Short, controlled bursts, each placed exactly where it needed to be and nowhere else. The canyon convulsed. Stone erupted outward as ridge positions vanished before they could react. The sound rolled through Gray 12 like thunder trapped between walls, violent and final. Rylan was already banking away before the echo finished. She didn't linger. She didn't admire the result. She knew better than to believe the canyon would grant her more than one clean pass. A warning light blinked, then steadied. Fuel dropped faster than she liked. She adjusted again, flying lower, using the canyon floor to mask her approach. Another turn. Another correction made before the aircraft demanded it. On the ground, Indigo 6 felt the shift before they understood it. Enemy fire wavered. One burst went wide. Another never came at all. Dust settled where moments earlier there had been movement. Senior Chief Mercer slowly raised his head, eyes scanning the ridgeline. "What changed?" he asked, not directing the question at anyone in particular. The medic paused mid-pressure, listening. Then the sound reached them fully, not just noise presence. The spotter finally spoke, his voice tight with disbelief. "That's not a flyover," Ven said. "That's a clear." Above them, Rylan came around for another pass. This time she anticipated resistance that never arrived. The positions she expected to engage were already silent, erased by timing and precision. She fired again anyway, not because she had to, but because certainty mattered. Short bursts. No wasted rounds. No wasted seconds. Her breathing remained even. Her face stayed calm. There were no words in the cockpit, no commentary, no declaration of who she was or what she had done before. She didn't need to announce herself. Every movement told the story for her. In the command tent, voices rose and fell as feeds updated. "She's inside the corridor," someone said. "No one stays inside that long," another replied. Calder said nothing. He watched the map the way a man watches a heartbeat line. Back in Gray 12, Ven lowered his optics slowly. He didn't smile. He didn't cheer. He felt something older settle into his chest. This pilot wasn't guessing. She wasn't gambling. She knew this place. And that meant the canyon, for the first time since Indigo 6 had been pinned, was no longer in control. The certainty spread quietly, like warmth returning to numb fingers. No speeches, no confirmation. Just the shared understanding, unspoken, that whoever flew above them had been here, before and survived. The first sign that something was wrong did not come from gunfire. It came from heat. Rylan's display flickered as she banked through the canyon, sensors painting the terrain in shifting gradients. She had already marked the remaining hostile positions threatening Indigo 6, already planned the next pass to hold pressure long enough for extraction. Then a cluster appeared where it did not belong. The signatures sat higher on the ridge, angled away from Indigo's position. They were patient, cold, deliberately placed to watch the air corridor rather than the canyon floor. Rylan's jaw tightened. Those weren't shooters waiting for SEALs. Those were missile teams waiting for helicopters. She rolled the A-10 slightly and zoomed the feed, confirming what instinct had already told her. Multiple launch sites. Overlapping fields. Perfect sight lines into the approach path. Rotary Detachment 47 would have to fly. The canyon had never been the true kill zone. It was bait. The ambush was meant for the rescue. Rylan didn't key the mic to ask permission. She didn't announce her intent as if it were open for discussion. Ghost 3, engaging South Ridge, she said, voice flat, factual, already moving. In the command tent, heads snapped up. What did she just say? Someone demanded. She's moving off Indigo. Another voice cut in. That ridge isn't cleared. Calder leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Why would she? The answer came a second later as the live feed sharpened. Captain Ward inhaled sharply. Those positions are aimed at the flight corridor. The room shifted. What had been a rescue plan became something far more fragile. She's not covering the team, Hale realized aloud. She's covering the helicopters. Above the canyon, Rylan dove. She forced the aircraft into a hard angle, the A-10 groaning as gravity crushed her into the seat. Warning lights flared again, brighter this time, and she ignored them with the same calm. She ignored the voices stacking on her radio. Her first burst tore into the ridge, stone and equipment vanishing in a violent spray. The second followed before the dust settled, eliminating a launcher already tracking the distant thump of rotors. She pulled up sharply, feeling the aircraft shudder in protest. Fuel dipped again. Her countermeasure panel blinked with an error she didn't like. She was already calculating how long she could remain inside the canyon before physics made the choice for her. On the ground, Indigo Six felt the change without understanding it. The enemy fire they expected never came. Instead, explosions rolled across ridges they hadn't been watching. The sound was heavier now, closer to the walls above them. Mercer looked up, confusion slicing through exhaustion. That's not for us, he muttered. The spotter tracked the blasts, then froze. They're clearing the corridor, Ven said. That's for the birds. As if summoned by the thought, the distant thump of rotor blades began to echo faintly through Gray 12. Extraction was inbound, and the enemy knew it. Rylan leveled out just in time to see the missile launch. It streaked upward from a position she hadn't fully neutralized a white-hot spear, ripping free of the ridge and arcing cleanly into the flight path. The Seeker locked instantly, snapping toward the second Chinook holding wide beyond the canyon mouth. There was no pause. No breath. No moment where courage had to be summoned. Rylan rolled directly into its path. She didn't announce it. She didn't curse. She didn't shout a warning that would arrive too late. She simply placed her aircraft where the missile wanted to go. The Seeker adjusted, hungry and precise, abandoning the Chinook and locking onto the larger, closer heat source. Onto her? In the command tent, the room erupted. She just took the lock. Someone shouted, "Break off." Another yelled into an open mic. Ghost 3, break off immediately. Rylan did not respond. The missile closed fast, smoke trails slicing through the canyon like a blade. Her cockpit filled with alarms missile warning, engine stress, countermeasures offline. The A-10 shook as she drove it forward, skimming so low the canyon floor blurred into brown and gray streaks. She dumped flares anyway, knowing they were unreliable, knowing hope sometimes mattered even when probability did not. The missile ignored them. It was committed. So was she. Rylan pulled into a turn that made no sense on paper, hugging the canyon wall until rock filled her canopy. The aircraft shuddered violently, a deep vibration rattling through the frame and into her bones. Smoke curled past the cockpit edge thin, at first, then thicker. An engine warning went solid. The A-10 was no longer healthy. It was wounded. Commands flooded her headset. Ghost 3, disengage. You're too low. Calder's voice cut through them all, controlled but strained. Evelyn, you've done enough. Break off. She did not answer. This was not defiance. This was focus. The canyon twisted ahead, a dead end by every visible measure. A sheer rock face loomed, filling her vision, offering no exit. The missile was close now, close enough for instinct to scream for escape. Rylan waited. She counted not numbers, but distance timing measured by pressure against the controls. She knew this wall. She remembered it from the last time. The way the canyon narrowed just before it tried to kill you. At the final possible instant, she pulled. The A-10 clawed upward, engines screaming, metal protesting as it scraped past the rock face by a margin so thin it felt imaginary. The missile couldn't follow. It slammed into the canyon wall in a violent bloom of fire and debris, the shockwave punching the air sideways and slamming into the A-10 like a giant hand. Ryland fought the controls as the aircraft rolled, alarms flaring, smoke thickening. For a heartbeat, the world tilted. Then the horizon steadied. She was still flying. One engine sputtered, but held. The stabilizer trembled, exhausted, but responded. Ryland leveled out, breath finally breaking free from the control she'd held since the lock. Behind her, the canyon burned. Ahead, the sky opened just enough to matter. In the command tent, silence fell, not relief, but shock. Hale stared at the feed, hands frozen above the map. Ward stood motionless, eyes locked on the smoking aircraft still moving across the screen. She just used the canyon, someone whispered. Calder exhaled slowly. She didn't take the missile, he said quietly. She took the choice. Above Gray 12, the sound of rotors grew louder. The Chinooks moved in, heavy and deliberate, unaware of how close death had come. Ryland circled once, wide and protective, smoke trailing behind her like a warning the sky would remember. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The mission had shifted again, and she was still in it.